represent SpeakIn as the managing partner, and I'm so excited to have with us today Paul Dupuis. And I hope I pronounced that right, Paul?
You got it, Deepshikha. Nice.
Paul, you are the managing director and CEO at Randstad India. You're an author and bringing the E5 moment to the Indian shores as we speak. It's such an honor to be talking to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
I'll just take a moment to, I'm sure you're a very, very popular gentleman, and as we've spoken to and seen in different forums, but as the formality says, I'll take a moment to share with audience a formal profile. Paul, you are a global leader with a commendable track record in hands-on business growth and organizational transformation leadership. You are currently the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Randstad India, one of country's leading HR organizations. And as you yourself said, you are growing, and thankfully India is, we look at the India story through the hiring lens, and it looks much more comforting looking at it from your perspective. Paul, you exemplify the spirit of agility and excellence in leadership in today's disruptive business landscape. You have over 25 years of professional experience in multiple countries, particularly in Asia, including Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea, and now India. And we will talk more about what is the uniqueness of India and what can Indian leaders learn from you and your journey. To close, you're a member of the executive board for the Indian Staffing Federation. You are a new author and have published your very first book on leadership. For those who can see, it's right behind Paul, The E5 Moment in June 2020. You're a passionate ice hockey player. Wow, I don't know where you get to do that in India. And volunteer as a coach and supporter of ice hockey in the remote part of Himalayas in North India. Oh, that's news to me. So very warm welcome, Paul. Such an honor to be hosting you in this conversation.
Thank you, Deepshikha. What a pleasure to be here this evening.
Thank you. So Paul, let me just start and give the stage over to you. Why don't we start from your journey and your path to India?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks again for having me. Well, I'm from Canada originally, from Windsor, Ontario. And I was born in a town which is kind of a typical blue collar city. It's actually the automotive capital of Canada. All of the big three automotive players are there. They have big manufacturing facilities because it's right across from Detroit. And so like most blue collar towns, quite a warm town, a real strong sense of community. So I grew up in a family where three boys were, we played a lot of sports, especially ice hockey, as you said, baseball in the summer, American football in the fall, and so on. And it was a big part of my life, but I always had a fascination with Asia growing up. I was quite into the martial arts. And my first taste of leadership came through sports. And when you play team sports, you have to be a follower, and sometimes you get the opportunity to be a captain. So I had the opportunity to do both, and that's when I really started to kind of learn a bit about leadership from sports, and then beyond that in student government and so on. My fascination with Asia kind of came to life in 1990. In fact, it'd be 30 years ago soon in September when I left Canada with a backpack and a dream for Osaka, Japan. And I think I had about $300 Canadian in my pocket, and that was it. That was my life savings. And this was pre-internet days, Deepshikha. If you think, 1990, I'm sure you remember it well, right? Got on the plane, didn't have anywhere to stay, didn't speak a word of Japanese, didn't have a job, had a working holiday visa, which would allow me to get a job and stay for 6 months. And I landed in Osaka, and I remember the very first night I slept on a park bench in downtown Osaka with my red backpack as my pillow. And I was on the other side of the world. And that's when the adventure began. I was supposed to stay for 6 months. I ended up falling in love with Japan. I stayed there for 5 years, and then in and out of Japan for about 25 years in total. So Japan's kind of a big part of me. It's where I learned a lot again about leadership and so on. So went to Japan, got into karate, again, really got deep into karate. I was training 6 days a week, and that's where I learned Japanese, but it's also where I learned Japanese culture. And I learned about the Asian approach to leadership, particularly the Japanese approach to leadership in the dojo and also in the workplace. Went back to Canada, did my grad studies in Vancouver, and I actually got licensed as a high school teacher. So somewhere hidden in my profile, it's probably not there, but I was actually a public high school teacher for about 10 years. So in my previous life, I was a teacher. And I was a teacher in Canada, in Vancouver. I was also a teacher in Japan. So I've done a number of roles, but all of this, I believe, and the leaders I meet would agree that, you know, everything you've done in your life becomes like a tool in your toolbox and you bring it with you. So many of the lessons I learned when I was becoming a teacher about pedagogy, about how people absorb and digest content and information, and how motivation, how to spark motivation and so on, all of that really comes to play, and I utilize it every single day as a leader. So great experience. Then back to Japan. I was an entrepreneur. I did a number of things beyond education. And at one point I had an opportunity to move to Singapore, and that was 2011. And I became head of Asia Pacific for a large Japanese job portal, which was also getting into recruitment. So kind of similar to a Naukri, but the Japanese version. And so I embarked off to Singapore, again, a place I'd never been before. A bit easier on the language as I speak English, but arrived and then built businesses across APAC. So I was doing M&A in many countries across Asia, as well as starting up companies within Asia. So name the country in Asia, I've probably done an M&A there or done some work in the countries. But there was one country that I danced around and I never actually dove into, not by intention, but perhaps by chance, and it was India. Back to Japan in 2013, joined Randstad, global #1 player in the HR services industry. And I was there to lead the growth of Randstad Japan, and was really enjoying it. And I must say, I speak Japanese, I understand the culture, kind of know how to get things done. It was my comfort zone. And I was actually doing some executive training at INSEAD in France. And my big boss from Amsterdam was in town to speak to us. And after he was done, he said, "Paul, come on, let's have a chat." So we went next door to a room and he said, "It's time for a change." And I thought, well, I'm doing quite well in Japan. It's been quite a journey. I'm comfortable. We're doing, we're really achieving, and we built something special. And then it occurred to me that I needed to follow my own advice. Step out of your comfort zone. And he was right. It was time for a change. And he leaned in and he said, "How about India?" So there I was sitting in Fontainebleau, France, in this small town, INSEAD, and he put that on the table. And I said, "Hang on, I got to call my wife." And I did exactly that on the spot. She's also from Japan. Called her. I said, "Hey, honey, what do you think about moving to India?" And you can imagine the reaction, right? So to her credit, she said, "Let's go take a look." So we came and took a look. Hey, the rest is history. But I should tell you that it was an interesting time, because we arrived for our take a look the morning after demonetization was announced. November 2016, right? And I remember seeing lineups everywhere outside ATMs. People lining up around the blocks and so on. And I asked the driver, "What's going on?" And he said, "Demonetization." I had no idea what the word meant. I mean, it was in nobody's dictionary, right? And then that's when my adventure began. Of course, I arrived in India, GST game, monsoons game, all kinds of interesting adventures so far. But that's how I got to India in 2017. Been here just over 3 years. And I must say, enjoying every minute. I've been really amazing discoveries and growing a lot, I think, as a leader as well, thanks to my experience here in India. Sorry, Deepshikha, I can't hear you. I've lost your sound.
I said that's music to our ears. I mean, I was talking to an economist yesterday, and she was very worried about the brain drain, and which she said would start again. So it's very it's overwhelming to see leaders like yourselves coming to India and then finding value, things that perhaps Indians themselves at that stage are not looking for. So let's now head to the E5 moment, Paul. Tell us something about the book, how it came to life, and what next.
Sure. Well, the E5 movement, the book, is kind of representative of my journey. It's been a journey to write this book, let me tell you. And not easy, huh? Not easy. I have a newfound respect for authors. I think we all have a book in our head somewhere, but to get it down on paper in a way that is compelling, that is readable, is a whole different challenge. But let me back up a little bit on the story behind the book. So first of all, it's about leadership, but it's more than that. It's actually a collection of stories from my journey as a leader, starting from the playground, from the ice hockey rink in Canada, extending into the karate dojo, into the boardroom. I was chairman of a large Canadian NPO, a global NPO called Hope International. So some of my experiences in Cambodia, some of my volunteer work and so on. Of course, here in India, there's a big Indian component in the book as well. But it was a model of leadership that I built over the years, mainly by observing effective, even exceptional leaders around me, but also leaders who are not so effective, because you learn from both, right? Those that I've worked for directly, those who I've seen, observed, also those across history, across genres. And in the book, I talk a lot about leadership in a variety of arenas, whether it's sports, of course, politics, business, religion, and so on. And I started to kind of identify that there's a common denominator on effective and even better exceptional leadership. And those common denominators formed my own ism of leadership, my own version of leadership. And over the years, I was sharing this with my own teams and people that I work with, and leaders, future leaders that I was mentoring. And it kind of became second nature to talk about this. So it was in my head, but prompting it to become a book was a different story. It was actually, again, studying. I'm a big believer in lifelong learning. So fortunately, I work for a company that also shares that value strongly. So I was at London Business School back in 2018. And we were talking about transformative leadership. So really how you transform and prepare an organization for the day after tomorrow, this whole notion of, peeking around the corner and so on, and how leaders also need to change and be ahead of the curve. And I was talking with the professor, and he said, tell me about your ideas about leadership. What is effective leadership? So then apparently, according to him, I went on for about 20 minutes with this very well-crafted idea of leadership. And then he responded by saying, you should write a book. And that was the first time I'd ever had someone say that to me. And I never thought I would write a book. It never was on my agenda. And then coincidentally, a bit of serendipity, 2 or 3 more people, just in the days and weeks after, out of the blue said, you should write a book. People were not at all connected. People in India, people in Japan. So I saw it as a bit of a sign. So I decided to do this. And that's how the book came to life. But let me tell you a little bit about the mechanics, because some people out here might be thinking, hey, I got a book in my head too. I want to write it. I had no idea where to start. Of course, I'm a big believer in asking for advice, right? So you stand on the shoulders of giants. So I asked authors, and they gave me their versions, and everybody has a different way of writing and bringing a book to life. So I thought, okay, I'm going to block out 2 hours every Saturday morning. I'm going to sit out on my balcony here in Bangor with a coffee, my laptop ready to go, and I'm going to write this book that's in my head. And so you can imagine what happened, Deepshikha. I mean, I started typing away everything that I knew about leadership. And then as I typed, I would then backspace, delete, 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 delete. And then I would type again. It reminded me back of my university days, and all of you folks over 50 will remember, we used to use typewriters, put the paper in, type, and we didn't get it right. We'd pull the paper out, throw it in the wastebasket, try again, and keep going, or use the whiteout. In this case, I kept deleting. 2 hours later, after that first session, I had a blank page. I had written so much and deleted just as much. And I thought, man, this is going to be tough, a lot tougher than I thought. So I kept trying every Saturday, and I just couldn't get it off the ground. And then I had a thought, why don't I Google it? Google has all the answers. So I typed in Google, how do you write a book? And there's so much out there on Google, by the way, on how to write a book. Again, lots of different ideas. I still couldn't find something that worked for me. Then I had a bit of an epiphany, and I thought, I like to talk about leadership. I'm comfortable talking about it. I do it every day with my teams. Why not record myself talking about leadership, my thoughts on leadership? So I took my phone and I recorded about 100 voice memos, short voice memos of myself, 3, 4, 5 minutes each, talking about an element of leadership, remembering stories that connect with each of the elements of leadership. Those 100+ audio memos then became the ingredients of the book. And I wrote the book again. Saturday mornings, I started in January, finished in October of last year.
Interesting, very interesting. And I have another technical question. The significance of name E5, explain that to us.
Sure. Well, there are 5 E's. The book is made up of 5 E's, the elements of exceptional leadership. So I'll just share those with you. The first one is envision. Envision. The great leaders that I've observed and studied over history and those who I've had the pleasure to work with were very good at crafting a vision which touched the hearts and the minds. And this is in the book, I talk about this. A lot of us as leaders fall in the trap of focusing mainly on the what and the how. But what we discover is that the exceptional leaders speak a lot more about the why and less about the what and the how. And so that was one kind of aha moment for me. And in the book, I talk about envision and how to craft a compelling vision. And of course, the what to watch out for when you're crafting your vision as well. So that's the first step. And a lot of leaders, I would say the more intellectual leaders around us are pretty good at this. The challenges they tend to have, though, is that the vision becomes too grand and it's not digestible. So it becomes 14 slides on a PowerPoint. And that's not a vision. A vision should be succinct, laser sharp. And, we talk about elevator proof, probably even shorter than that. It needs to be so sharp and so clear, and it has to contain the why. That's the first most important step to becoming a game-changing leader, is coming up with a vision which is compelling. Secondly, once you've done that, next it's about expressing that vision. So express. And, leaders who are good on the stage and good at the microphone do really well at this. But the challenge is those leaders tend not to spend so much time on the first E, the envision, right? They just want to get on the stage and get out there and talk about it. So it's really important that you have a well-crafted vision. And then, of course, getting out and sharing it. Now, sharing it in our current world is not just about getting on stage. I talk about in the book about the omni-channel strategy to expressing your vision, how we need to leverage every form of touch point and contact that we can, including social media, of course, but there's so many ways. It goes back to maybe my experience in education that there are, 7 different kinds of learners, right? And so we need to address the different kinds of learners to ensure that everybody gets it. Because that's one of the frustrating points for a lot of leaders is no matter how much I talk about the vision, people just don't get it. They don't absorb it. And so I give you some tips on how to express effectively. And of course, we see lots of examples over history. Martin Luther King Jr. was a great example by simply starting his speech with, "I have a dream." He immediately had the entire audience. Now that may seem like a small thing, but there are some really important lessons that can be learned by the leaders who were very good at expressing their vision. So I talk about that in the book, and I give examples from history across borders, of course, some good examples from India in there as well. And I talk about my own experiences. Then the third E is about excite. And this is really important. This is the turning point. You can have a well-crafted vision, you can get out there and do the omni-channel strategy, but if people don't get excited, then the vision never comes to life. And this is an important moment. This is not necessarily about charisma. It's not about being, loud and flashy. It's more about pushing the right buttons so that people are inspired to action. And the proof in the pudding comes when the teams are keen and eager to move, to stand up, to get up off their seats and go, and they start using language like, "When can we start? Let's do this." They start raising their hands saying, I want to lead this. That's when you know you're well on your way. So that moment of excite is very important. And there are ways to do that. And I share some how-to tips and some observations of leaders who were very good at that. And the fourth one is enable. And I will tell you, in my own leadership journey, this is the stage that I'm at. I'm really focusing a lot of my energy on enabling. Enabling for me is about ensuring that your teams have the tools they need to bring the vision to life. Okay, so you've got a well-crafted vision, you've expressed it in an omni-channel way. People are excited about it. They're talking about it at the chai shop, at the water cooler. I mean, they're texting each other and they want to be involved. They think it's cool. You've painted a picture of what the world will look like when this vision comes to life. And this is where a lot of leaders fall flat, because a lot of leaders, as I've observed, will say, "All right, I've given you everything, now go." And then it doesn't come to life. And so talk about what enabling really means. Enabling is about tools. It could be technology, but it's not only about tools. It's actually about creating a platform, an arena where people can shine. And shining sometimes means experimenting, trying, falling down, the freedom to fall down, the freedom to get back up and try again. In other words, the enabling leader also needs to be careful not to get in the way. So create the environment, the arena for people to shine, and then get out of their way. Let them go. And again, in enabling phase, this is where a lot of leaders fall in the trap of micromanaging. We're even seeing that now, particularly in this COVID crisis, where people are packing calendars with managers are packing their team's calendars with Zoom calls and and review meetings and so on. sometimes by giving the space, you actually let people spread their wings and fly and shine. So enabling is really about all of that, creating an environment, a culture where people can shine. Then the final one, let's face it, the moment of truth. All the 4 E's are nice if you get them right, but the final E is the ultimate measurement of success, and that's to execute, to bring the vision to reality for measurable impact. In a business environment, we can measure simply by the output. But I'm a strong believer, and anybody who works with me knows this. And it took a while, by the way, in India for my teams to get used to me. But I don't start meetings with numbers. I don't start meetings with spreadsheets. I want to finish the meeting with the spreadsheet, because I believe the output, the outcome, is a direct result of having the right vision that's been expressed in a way that people are excited about it. They've been able to bring it to life. And then when you have the right people in the right seats with the right support, the right culture, the right strategy and leadership, it's inevitable that they will go ahead and execute and bring the vision to life. And so that's the flow of the book. I talk a bit in the beginning about my own experiences. I share some personal stories. And then towards the latter part of the book, I talk about the reader. It's a call to action, hence the 5 movement. I really believe leadership is about a movement. And none of us are islands. We are so much stronger together and smarter together when we share. And I'm really encouraged so far, although the book's just been out a short time, leaders are coming to me and sharing their feedback and talking about how it's inspired them, and they want to talk about it, and they want to share ideas and best practices and so on. So what I'm really aiming for here is to build a community of leaders that are aiming to be game changers.
Paul, that's extremely exciting, and I think that's a very rare moment when a leader has put it so succinctly, exactly what the entire journey is all about. So fantastic, E5. Thank you very much. I'll just take a leading point from here. And before we started, we were talking about a small excerpt from the book. Would you like to read it for us?
Sure. You know, a lot of people ask me, can leadership be learned? I've had that question a lot. It's a very philosophical question. You think about the phrase born leader. He or she is a born leader. I don't believe that there's such thing as a born leader. I think every single one of us, by the nature of being human, have the ability to become a leader. But let me just read something from one of the first chapters. Here's the good news. Any one of us can be a leader. And even better, a game-changing leader. Leadership is learned. It's built through experience. It's born in opportunities to influence others, whether it's on the playground, in your home, or in the boardroom. And the best part is that leadership doesn't require a title. Becoming an exceptional leader takes effort, though. Focus, commitment, a strong sense of self-awareness, and plenty of humility. Leadership is defined by behavior. Exceptional leadership, then, requires exceptional behavior.
Excellent. Excellent. I think we'll have to have a leading conversation, because I don't think that the time that we have is going to be enough. If I keep digging onto because it's sounding so exceptionally interesting. Let me come back to Paul as a person, as a thought leader himself. Why don't we talk about your perspectives on India and the potential of the country? A very small little comment, if you would like
Sure.
to give us.
Sure. Yeah, India it's a fascinating country. I must say I'm really enjoying it. And there's different perspectives on India, outside-in perspective. Some people, I say foreign expats and others who have lived here, really love India. Some don't. I must tell you, I'm really enjoying it. It's not easy. Coming from Japan, where everything, well, let's talk about extremes. We even talk about in the framework of the company I work for, 39 countries. We say that Japan is at one end, India is at the other in many ways. Business culture, let's say the evolution of the economy and so on, right? But what I like about India is there is an eagerness that I haven't seen anywhere else. There is an ambition, and there is this spirit of embracing new ideas and future focused. It's extremely fast moving. And in Japan, there's this thing called Kaizen. I'm sure you've heard of it, right? Kaizen is all about lean. It's about identifying bottlenecks, the wastage. It's about being meticulous. And there's also a lot of consensus built into that. It requires a lot of hard work, it takes time. In India, on the other hand, when you say go as a leader, the team goes and they go fast. Now, the challenge in India, though, is to make sure that people stay on task and stay focused. on the North Star. And so that's something that I've learned how to do here in India. But India has a secret weapon, which is maybe controversial, but I like it a lot. It's Jugaad. Jugaad. And I know there's different viewpoints on Jugaad, but I think if you harness Jugaad, the spirit of Jugaad, the creativity, the entrepreneurial spirit of Jugaad, the ingenuity, marry that with Kaizen, the meticulous focus, bring those two together and watch out. And that's what I've tried hard to do here in India. I really enjoy being in India. I must say, it is well, it is still the fastest growing economy in the world, although we're in challenging times right now. The IMF has downgraded the projections, but it's still considered the fastest growing economy. It will continue to be in 2021 and beyond, at least the next 3 to 5 years, we know that. It's the youngest population in the world, workforce population. The workforce population average age is 29 in India. It's the fastest growing. So 1 million people enter what the OECD says the work age population is 19 to 59. So 1 million people every month enter that zone in India. So you've got a young workforce that's eager, ambitious, has the spirit of let's try it, Jugaad, ingenuity, all of that comes together to make a very compelling story. And the industry I work in, which is really about creating gainful employment, is right in the middle of this perfect storm in a way.
And you're growing, so that's a good.
We are growing. We are growing in India. Yeah.
Fantastic, and that speaks volumes for your leadership, Paul. My next question, and while being a leader is a lot about the business steps and enabling and the 5 E's that you talked about, you yourself has personified and spoken multiple times about doing well and doing good. Share with us some experiences on that front.
Sure. It took me a while to figure this out. I remember when I was when you're in your teens, it's all about you, right? And anybody who's a parent knows what I mean. It's about me. And in my 20s as well, I wanted to be the best I could be. So I was competing in karate. I was competing 6 nights a week. I fought in the Japan Nationals. I wanted that gold medal, got the silver medal. I almost got there. I'm going to get, I kept pushing myself. It was about I, me. I got married and I had kids. And I started to realize, oh, wow, now there's this new word here, we and us. And then I became a leader for the first time. I was no longer an individual contributor. And I realized, wow, I have people that depend on me. It's we. And this word we came more and more into my mind. Now, for a long time, it was about doing well. Doing well was excelling at what you do, right? Being the best you could be. For me, doing well was myself. Excelling, being the best I could be. Then I started to discover, actually, excelling is not only about that. It's about doing well together. And that means achieving. Now, if you're a student, it means getting the grades. If you're, an individual contributor, it means smashing your targets. If you're a salesperson, whatever it is, your deliverable is. But then as you start to lead, you realize it's about leading teams to that outcome. And that's a whole different challenge. And I did that and through into my, early 40s. Then I had kind of a hallelujah moment where I started to think, and I think it's a bit of mortality. You start to get in your 40s. I'm over 50 now. You start to think about the greater purpose of life. And it occurred to me that doing well was not enough. That actually a truly rich life is about doing well and doing good. So excelling and being the best at what you do, but at the same time, doing something good for the world. And the doing good part, we can define it however we want. I mean, and all of us have our way of doing good. It could be in our behaviors, in our thoughts, in our actions. Some of us are attracted to certain causes, whether it's protecting the planet, helping out or protecting the unprotected, and so on. There's so many options, right? So for me, do well and do good was it became my guiding principle, my North Star, kind of a life mantra now. I'm working hard to do well in, let's say, the workplace and in my roles, my various roles that I play, husband, father as well, but also to do good for the world. And for me, that's I think it's a very important obligation we have. And I've got a few examples, but one that's very close to me is Cambodia. I discovered Cambodia in 1992 when Pol Pot was still in power, Khmer Rouge. You'll remember, absolutely horrible time, genocide. 1/3 of the population was absolutely wiped out by the Khmer Rouge. And I went there. I was actually training in Muay Thai kickboxing in Thailand. And when you're young and not so, let's say, aware of the world, a friend of mine said, let's pop over to Phnom Penh, Cambodia. Well, 1992. In the middle of Khmer Rouge regime still in power, wasn't thinking. Anyway, a lot of stories there. I talked a little bit in the book about it, but a lot of side stories from that adventure. But then I fell in love with the country. Fast forward 15 years later, I got involved with an MPL called Hope International, which is a sustainable development agency, which uses the Grameen Bank. And I know you interviewed Dr. Yunus. The Grameen Bank, I'm a big fan of him, although I've never met him. We used his model in Cambodia, using the microcredit, the Grameen Bank, the Nobel Prize, of course, model. And instead of using money, we actually used something called a cow bank. We created a cow bank. So we lent cows to the very poor in Cambodia and taught them how to plow the fields. They were typically single mothers. And then we would help them grow crops to feed their kids. And then over time, they'd have an excess. We would take them to the market, show them how to sell the excess crops. And that would be the first time in their lives they would touch money. Then they would enter the economy. And so many wonderful stories. I would travel to Cambodia every year to volunteer and support. We built schools and so on. So that's one example, but I've got one more in India you mentioned here. I'm an ice hockey, passionate about ice hockey. And I'm doing some volunteering up in Ladakh as well, promoting and developing ice hockey in Ladakh in India.
Wow. I mean, I didn't know about that. So I'm probably somewhere in the hope zone of doing that someday. Okay.
Well, come and join us. It's a beautiful place in the winter, let me tell you.
I hope, I mean, with all that's happening right now, I hope it stays beautiful and accessible. So, so great. So Paul, we spoke about a variety of things. What is coming next? So when is there another book up in there waiting to come out?
Yeah, in fact, Saturday mornings, you can find me again out on my balcony. Now that I have my, let's say my rhythm and even a model that seems to work for me so far, I'm about 90% done my second book, which is a very different book. It's connected. It's connected. It's not about leadership. The leadership factors into it. I don't want to give away too much right now, but I can tell you it's a series of stories, and each chapter is a story with a discovery that I've had, and it's generally connected to my journey in my life and discoveries that I've had across borders, across cultures, including India, again. But one of the themes in there is leadership, but it's not all about leadership. It's a lighter read, but hopefully thought-provoking as well.
Fantastic. I mean, that is, I think that's where, I mean, I personally, whenever I've seen you speak, write, and seen whatever you've done so far, it's so inspiring always to look at a new perspective on what Indian leadership or the Asian leadership stands for. So thank you very much, Paul, for that. This is the time when we bring in questions from the audiences. Is there any other thought that you would like to add before we start taking questions, Paul?
No, I'm very, very keen to hear some questions as well. Thank you.
Perfect. So let me have the first question come in. This is coming from Nafis. Nafis asks, what was your biggest challenge, things that bothered you the most? So I think we need to go off air and you can comment offline. When you moved from Japan to India?
Oh, well, thank you for the question, Nafis. It's a great question. I must say, when you leave your comfort zone, a lot of things bother you because everything is foreign and alien. So it's very important to separate, things simply being different and bothering you, and things that maybe don't match with your own views of how things should be. So I would say, first of all, and let's go down to the very basics, okay? After living in Japan a long time, partly from Japan, partly from my upbringing as well, I always believed in this notion of you show courtesy to others, and one way you do that, simple way, is by being on time. And in India, being on time has, different interpretations, as I discovered quickly, right? And I learned this wonderful word up in Mumbai when I asked the taxi driver, how far is he? He said, bajume. And apparently that's just, And I learned that 5 minutes is not 5 minutes and so on. Now, these are small things, but they're big things when you're tasked with leading a large, complex organization across the four corners of India, across cultures within India as well. And so I was faced with the challenge of building a culture which was borderless, because I do believe some things around professionalism are borderless. I can tell you that Sachin Tendulkar, if they said practice started at 10 a.m., guess what? He was there a lot earlier. In fact, he was famous for being the first one at the pitch and the last one to leave, right? The professionals among us, the exceptional leaders and players among us, they know no borders when it comes to professionalism, right, and behavior. So for me, that was the first thing I had to bring, this discipline and this courtesy that comes with being a true professional. But we got over that pretty quickly. My team now, it's great. I show up to meetings and 10 minutes before they're already in, laptops are open, they're ready to go. I mean, it's wonderful. I'm the one who's late now. So, and we get a kick out of it. We talk about it openly as well. So that's part of the transformation. I think the other thing is just, the life in India is very, very unpredictable. And that's what makes it special. But when you come from a land which is extremely predictable, when I was living in Japan for so long, to come from a land where, it's unpredictable. I think in Japan in 20 years, the lights went off maybe twice. I mean, the lights will go off 3 or 4 times in a day in India, and that's normal. But that's great. Now, that might have been frustrating in the beginning, but then I started to embrace it because that's part of the experience. And I must say, thanks to India, I've become more agile. I think I was already a pretty patient guy, but I think I became more patient in India. So, there's been, let's say, some small frustrations, but overall, the joys that I've experienced in India far outweigh the frustrations.
Great. So, Paul, I've just received a question on my WhatsApp from one of the participants. He asks, what is your sense of the the question is that you have been culturally sensitive by traveling and backpacking and being in those countries, and therefore you've learned the cultural contours of different geographies. What would you recommend? With COVID, the world is becoming even more flatter. And while the nationalistic fervor is coming up, there are people who are likely to transact more and more cross-border as we move along. What is your lesson for people wanting to understand and develop sensitivities to other cultures in the shortest possible time?
Great question. And yeah, amidst this ambiguity and adversity that we face right now, where you can't simply go buy a plane ticket, jump on a plane and immerse yourself in a different world, right? Challenging to do right now. But I do think we can also leverage technology to have these kinds of discoveries. I was on a call earlier today. We're in 39 countries. I was on a call with people that represented 15 different countries. Instantly, with one click, I was able to interact with someone on the top left of my screen in Argentina, bottom right in China, top right in Singapore. Keep going. I mean, it's amazing. Now, being there is one thing, and I think physically as well, by the way, being there is one thing, because we've all been tourists in a different land. But it's different when you cross the border mentally, emotionally, and actually try to understand what the other person's thinking. You can do that in a virtual environment, absolutely. So I spend a lot of my time on the calls asking rather than telling. I want to learn. I come into these calls, and I think maybe there's some advice I can give leaders as well. The spirit of I know versus I want to know. That seeking mind, that curiosity, there's really only humans have the ability to consciously make a decision to pursue curiosity, to wake up one morning and say, you know what? I want to learn how to play the piano. I'm going to start taking lessons today. And then they can take, human beings can take action to do that. It's the same thing right now. We talk about becoming culturally sensitive and so on. Really, truly wanting to understand how that person on the other side of the screen sees the world takes effort, huh? So you don't need to physically get on a plane and go somewhere. I think you can have those discoveries as well using technology to do it. But it's a mindset. It starts with the way you approach it. The moment you click sign in, how you approach it. Are you there to tell, or are you there to learn? Are you there to listen? Are you there to ask? And I think that's the first big step. But absolutely, leverage technology fully to get those discoveries.
Excellent point. Another question coming in from Aditi Acharya. And yeah, I think people really want to know about your life and your next steps. So what do you think would be your next challenge that you would pick in your professional life?
It's a great question. I'm sure Randstad India colleagues are all thinking about this. Some are probably hoping it's soon, I don't know, but some maybe not, I don't know. Yeah, I have to say, it's an interesting question because you often get asked that question, back in the day of the traditional job interview, and where will you be in 5 years? What is your goal? And so I've never operated like that, Deepshikha. I must tell you, in total honesty, I've always been a guy that focused on what was in front of me. I'm very mission centric. I see everything that we do as a mission. As long as it's connected with a compelling vision, I'm all in. And I will not rest until we bring that vision to life and we achieve the mission. So for me, a mission is one at a time. And this is my advice to the young, let's say younger leaders, future leaders. Focus on today. A lot of leaders I talk to are so focused on how can I become a CEO? Well, I never sat down one day when I was a kid in Canada thinking I'm going to be the CEO of a massive company in India one day. Never had that as a goal. Even 5 years ago, I didn't have that as a goal. When you focus on what's in front of you right now and you're completely in the moment and you give it your best and you do well and you do good, the next thing naturally comes. So that's the way I've always approached my journey, my career as well, by the way. And I know many of my colleagues will, talk to the boss. So what's next for me, and start to kind of be proactive to set up those conversations. I typically don't do that. I really believe that if you give it your all on what you're doing right now and you do it with good values, the next thing comes. So for me, working with a global company like Randstad, which again is a great company, they're all about developing their leaders, especially their performers. Perhaps another country, another challenging country. I like challenges. I'm not a fan of kind of maintaining the status quo. I like turnarounds. I like transformations, those kinds of things. I think on a global scale would be very interesting as well. I must say I'm very comfortable, maybe is the word. I'm confident in APAC. I like this region very much. I think it's very exciting. I think it's the best time in modern history to be in this region, let's face it. Most of the fastest growing economies, transforming economies are right here in Asia. So yeah, so long answer to your question, Aditi, but I don't think too much about it, to be honest. I just want to do the best I can do with my role right now, and the next thing will come.
That's an excellent point. I think I have not really had leaders say it as clearly. Be in the current, do your best, and the next thing will happen. As I say, when you turn around and you look, the dots do fall in line. So next question comes in from an anonymous attendee, and I think it's a loaded question, but I'll leave it to you. How do you want to answer that? When do you give up in life? I think the question is more about when is it time to say it's not working, let's move on.
Wow, yeah, loaded question. Well, you never give up, right? The moment you give up, you're dead. So let's just agree on that. Huh? But I think there is something to be said for knowing when you need to pivot. And I actually talk about this in the book. Leaders, we're guilty. I think leaders are guilty, especially the pace-setting leaders are especially guilty of this, right? When you make a decision to charge up that hill, no matter what, can become dangerous, because maybe the situation changes along the way where you shouldn't charge up that hill. And maybe you need to go this way instead of that way. But I think a lot of leaders take that as failure as well. And it's not necessarily the case. I mean, let's face it, we came into 2020. I had a grand strategy for 2020. I haven't found one leader yet in late 2019 that was prepared for what was coming in 2020. Nobody. 5 years ago, when we were all talking about our 2020 vision, remember those days? Every company had a grand vision, Vision 2020. Nobody had a global pandemic on their PowerPoint deck, right? So I think there is something that, leadership especially calls for a level of humility to admit when things are not going wrong, and then pivoting. That's not giving up. I think ultimately, I do believe we should never give up, but we should have the guts to pivot, to course correct. And that's tough. That's tough for a lot of leaders, but I don't see that as giving up or failing. Excellent point. So Sanjay Shetty asks, and again, I think that take your pandemic point forward. What is the one thing that has changed forever for you due to COVID? Well, I talk with a lot of leaders every day, and I think we all share this common conclusion that it's a harsh reminder about what's important in life. I say harsh because it's tragic. Huh? It's tragic as COVID, that so many lives are being lost, and that this virus is so terrible. At the same time, it's a bit tragic that we needed a pandemic to remind us of what's important. This thing snuck up on us and it hit us hard, and then it taught us that health, family, safety, shelter, food, all the very basic items that we would be taken for granted pre-COVID, that these are very, very important things. And I think that's clearly, to me, it's a reminder. I knew it deep down inside, but it wasn't on top of my mind. And COVID has brought it right to the top of my mind. The most important stuff, the simple stuff, is the most important stuff. And I think everyone I talk to now agrees. And you know, it's interesting, Deepshikha, you know, we look at, people are talking about their credit card bills now, how low their credit card bills have been over the past few months. Although people have started to rediscover shopping online, I know that. But generally, when we went back to basics, we started to consume less. Consuming less, what did it do? It cleaned up the air, right? It made the world a better place. So it's really interesting that we actually, by going back to basics, just being in the moment, being with each other, taking care of ourselves physically and mentally, made the world a better place. So I think, you know, that to me is probably the biggest discovery. Whether it changed me, I think I was already there, but it triggered that. I think one other thing, it's raised my awareness about the importance of knowing your limits. So my wife says this to me too sometimes. Okay, I'm 52, but she says, you're not 25 anymore. But, you know, I try to go like I'm 25. And sometimes, you know, it's okay to say, hey, you know, have balance, eh? Know when to switch off. Switch off. And this work from home new world we're in is very alien for a lot of us. A lot of us have not experienced this. We don't know how to handle it. So we went overboard again, especially the pace setters. And I'm guilty of it. I filled my calendar from morning till night thinking if I stayed busy, I'd be making an impact. But then I realized that all I was doing was getting tired. So the importance of mental health as well as physical health, the combination of those two, knowing when to turn on and turn off, I think those are things that will stay with me forever.
Excellent, fantastic. I don't think I've had anyone say it better, Paul. I know we've exceeded time, but I mean, frankly, I don't feel like letting the conversation go. But I'll take the last question from Manu Kumar Sharma. He says, "Hi, Paul. What is the most important lesson?" And I will extend that question a bit. I will ask you for 3 most important lessons that you've learned in your journey so far.
Well, I'll talk about my journey, my life journey, of course, but my journey as a leader. I think the first thing is you need to have a guiding principle about what you stand for. I think it's very, very important. We all need to have a North Star. So, and a lot of us, I think where we tend to go off the rails is when we lose track of what we stand for. So ask yourself, what is your greater purpose? You know, why are you here? And not to be too philosophical, but it could be in your role in an organization. That's fine. What is my greater purpose? Define it and then work hard to bring it to life. If you talk about life in general, being put on this planet, well, hey, think about it. Why am I here? What is my, how can I make this world a better place? And define that and then go for it. Give it all you got. I think it's very important for all of us to have a North Star. Define it, make it yours, and then live it. Live it. That's one. Huh? Second one is, let's talk about leadership for a minute. You know, I came to India. What's really interesting, I'm often asked the question by media and by other leaders. So what's different about leading in India versus, you know, Japan and Singapore and all the other places I've lived and worked and led? But you know what's interesting? The more I cross borders, the more I travel, the more I lead in different arenas, I've discovered there are a lot more similarities than there are differences. And that's the wonderful thing about leadership. It's actually universal. It's borderless. It's timeless. The rules of effective and exceptional leadership are stronger than any border, than any culture. There are some nuances, of course, of leading in India and Japan, but ultimately, will you follow a leader who walks the talk? I bet you ask that question in any country on the planet, and everyone will say, yes, I will follow a leader who walks the talk. Yeah? Will you follow a leader who's transparent and honest? You're going to get the answer, yes. Yeah? And so on and so I could ask you 10 questions, and these are universal. So I think timeless leadership, borderless leadership, that's the most effective leadership. So that's the second discovery. I think the third one is, I go back to what I just said earlier. If you really want to perform at a high level, whatever your role is, again, in an organization, as a husband, as a wife, as a father, as a son, as a daughter, it doesn't really matter what your role is as a volunteer. You need to be at your best. Being at your best means both physically and mentally healthy. And for me, I've always been into fitness because I realize that if I'm physically fit, then I can give it my all. I can give 100% every single day. Because when you're healthy, you can really, you can make an impact. You have the potential to make an impact when you're healthy. When you're not, you're dragged down and it's tough. But that is equally important for mental and emotional health. So I think all of us need to realize that we need to value both, and both take effort. Think about it. All of us have, at one point in our life, done some sort of fitness routine. Some of us have joined gyms. Some of us have started the new year with a resolution and said, I'm going to get in shape this year. I'm going to lose weight or whatever it is, right? Walking into the gym is not enough, right? You actually have to walk in the gym and do something. It takes hard work. Put in the hard work, you start getting in shape. How many of us actually, that's a fitness plan. How many of us have put in an emotional or mental health fitness plan in place? Not many of us, myself included. So imagine if we put equal emphasis on both physical and mental and emotional health, and watch out, because that sets the platform for us to shine in whatever we do.
That's fantastic. That's phenomenal, Paul. And I think I've taken so many notes here in my notebook, and I'm sure the audiences would have done that as well. Thank you very much, Paul. What a lovely conversation. Wonderful talking to you. Thank you, audiences, for joining us today for this conversation. And we look forward to more and more on the E5 and the upcoming book as well.
Thank you, Deepshikha. Real pleasure to speak with you tonight. I wish you all the best. Stay safe.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening.